It is that time again, Coach Me Up podcast, and it's a little different show today. It's just Chris Burke, my buddy, my co-host. I'm Jimmy Dykes, just the two of us. We got a lot to cover. It's Final Four weekend upon us, and college basketball, college baseball is off and rolling. We're going to go back and revisit the past 5-6 shows that we've done so far in the year of 2023 and review some of those lessons that we've been taught and so we're going to coach each other up a little bit, and we're going to coach you up along the way. And we always appreciate our team, you guys, joining us for these podcasts. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Chris, I mentioned earlier, we got some an answered prayer request. Our buddy Reed Claypool.
Yep.
A little guy we've been praying for in Kentucky, got a clear bill of health that cancer has left his body. We praise God about that. We lift up some other prayer requests right now. Just the shooting this week in Nashville, obviously, just crushes all of our hearts. So we lift those people up before we even get started here. But with that, God, you're a good God, and we thank you for who you are. And we pray that you teach us today as Chris and I visit with one another here for the next several minutes. So, Chris, as you know, my season is done, D-U-N-N, done, as a college basketball analyst, because the tournament, the NCAA tournament is on CBS, and I'm exclusively with ESPN. So I've been watching the tournament like everybody else for the past couple of weeks. I had to do some postseason stuff, and it was fun. I got to do the women's NCAA tournament first and second round up in Maryland, which was good ball. So, but since then, I've been off like everybody else, watching this tournament play out exactly like I thought, Chris, it was going to play out.
You had it nailed?
Yeah, well, from the standpoint that the regular season, Chris, was so uncertain. There were so many Saturdays, I remember looking back, thinking, how many unranked teams beat ranked teams on Saturdays? It was like crazy. Like every Saturday would be 10, 12, 14 ranked teams losing to unranked teams. The number one spot in the AP poll continued to rotate all year long. There never was that clear-cut team like we had a couple of years ago with Baylor and Gonzaga. So I honestly, I'm not shocked at all.
Year, to be fair,
yeah.
You said that all year.
So I'm not surprised at all where we are. But you think about it, this is the first Final Four that we're going to have without a top 3 seed. So the top 12 teams that we all thought going into the NCAA tournament, none of them made it. They've all been bounced. Okay. How about this? Let me
ask you this. You gave us that stat that the top 12, what was it? The AP top 12 in January. What was that date? It always had the national.
It was week 6 of the AP poll.
Was UConn in that? Because they were great early, right?
I believe UConn. Oh yeah, UConn was definitely in there.
So they're the one
they sure were,
and they feel like the favorite, right? So
they feel like the favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say that because I saw them in November, UConn at Florida. I did the game, and for the next two months, I kept telling everybody UConn's the best team in the country. The best team I've seen. I maybe even told you that at one point.
Yeah, you did.
Then they hit a little bit of a slide in the Big East play, which is going to happen, but they have found their groove. So I would think going in, as this podcast is dropping about 24 hours before games, that UConn would be the favorite. But I'm telling you, they should win it, but they may not win it. It's kind of how I look at it.
Well,
and it speaks to
they're talking like it. Like Dan Hurley's like, I have a Final Four team. Like, I mean, the way he talks about them is we're really good, and I'm not really sure what happened there in the middle, but this is who we are, you know?
Well, and you mentioned Dan Hurley. I got to know him a little bit 2 years ago in the Bahamas for a tournament, and then this past year I did one of his games. He, for the Hurley name that is associated with basketball at the highest level, he really coaches with a chip on his shoulder and proving that I belong on this big stage. It's interesting to me that he's wired like that. So I think that he has a team that obviously is the most talented one left, but they're a dangerous team because I think they're talented and they play with a chip on their shoulder like their coach does. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it kind of makes them the favorite going in. It's interesting, Chris, how it's I think it's a 1 year that we have to look at maybe differently than others because of the transfer portal, the NIL. Is this kind of how the tournament's going to be going forward, where there is no true blue bloods anymore dominating the sport. I mean, this 1 year right now kind of says we might be going that way. But think about this. This is the first Final Four without a single McDonald's All-American since 1979.
UConn doesn't have
There's
one.
There's not a McDonald's All-American left
Wow.
right now in college basketball in this Final Four. So it speaks to old. It speaks to player development. It speaks to guys hanging in there, getting better, finding the right dudes that come in from the transfer portal that have played a ton of ball, and there's some of that out there. So there's just some interesting things about this Final Four that I've really enjoyed.
Well, so let me ask you a philosophical question, okay?
Yeah.
We're on Coach Me Up podcast, so let's talk coaching here a little bit. And congratulations to the coaches at San Diego State and FAU and Miami, and obviously we already talked about Dan Hurley at UConn for coaching their team to this point, because we know there's a lot of big money coaches that are there. We all know they're getting paid that money for a lot of reasons, but part of it is to play deep in March. So now that we've seen what we've seen, and this has kind of been like, this is like going back to like 2019 or so, where we've started to see a lot of quote unquote parity in the tournament. Okay. Not that there haven't always been upsets, but it feels like we're getting more and more of this. Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, none of them were in the Sweet 16, 2 out of the last 3 years. With the portal and with NIL, are we past, like you said, are we past the era? I heard Jay Billis talking about this. He still thinks the best teams are going to be around. But are we past the era of the blue bloods dominating the sport?
I tend to think that we're trending that direction. Now I would say that UConn is a blue blood.
Yeah, they've won enough.
Well, honestly,
right.
we have one of them, but they're maybe a light blue color, but they're a blue blood.
Yeah, what do they got, 3 or 4 titles?
Yeah. So, but I just think with how you can quickly flip your roster with the transfer portal changes the typical blue bloods dominating this sport going forward. I think that's exactly where we're at. And the NIL money changed Miami in 1 year. That's how Miami has built their roster.
It is. Yeah. I tell people this all the time. Think about it in the context of youth sports. Okay. Now I know once you get to a certain age, it matters less, but you would never take a 14U team to a 17U tournament.
No.
Right? They would get killed. Now, each year that gap shrinks a little bit. But essentially, we'll just talk about Kentucky. Kentucky basically is going to try to take a 19U team next year to a 22U tournament. That's what they're going to try to do, right? And even pre-NIL, that only worked once.
One time.
And that wasn't a full team of freshmen, but a lot of freshmen, right? Now, the game is even older. And, I saw you tweet yesterday something about who was it that was being interviewed? One of the Kentucky freshmen was talking about winning the national championship.
McDonald's All-American. And right away he's saying, we're going there to win a national championship.
Yeah, and you're like, whoa, bro, pump the brakes, and it's just like it's just, if you just think about it, just zoom out and just think about it like that, 22-year-olds versus 19-year-olds, that's a hard ask. You better be Anthony Davis. You better be.
And you better have a couple more Anthony Davises with you in that class.
Yeah, it's just, man, theoretically or philosophically, I think that's just really hard to do.
Chris, there was one true freshman that started out of the Elite Eight teams. So the last 8 teams standing, only one true freshman was in the starting lineup. So I just think that's where we're heading. I think
Duke's
that's what makes
Duke's got a bunch of that coming in too, right? Duke and Kentucky both.
Yeah.
And it'd be one thing if it was college baseball, not to transition away from hoops, but in college baseball, you're guaranteed to have blue blood freshmen. Let's just, if we're going to keep using that right, I should say. McDonald's All-American 5-star. That's the term we should use. Blue chip is what I was looking for. Blue chip freshman. In baseball, you're going to have those kids for 2 or 3 years. Most of the time, 3. 2, if they're 21 years old within 45 days of the draft, they can go after their second year. But still, that's 2 years, right? But most of the time, you're going to get a blue chip freshman for 3 years.
Yep.
So Florida, Vanderbilt, Louisville, these schools can build their programs on blue chip freshmen because they know they're going to grow up in their program. In hoops, if you're getting a blue chip freshman, the point is for him he's going there for 1 year. So that's what, that's the hardest part about trying to be young is not only are you young for this year, you have to start all over the next year. Like it's just
absolutely
just a totally different process.
Old wins, man.
Old wins.
Well, old good wins.
That's right.
You can't just be old. You got to be old and good.
Know how to play.
I think that's absolutely. So
and you watch
I
FAU.
thought it was cool.
FAU knows exactly who they are, and obviously, I watched Tennessee try to run around and chase them. And that's going to be a very interesting matchup with San Diego State because San Diego State's big and physical, not nearly as offensive. So that's a little bit like Tennessee in that they want to beat you up and slow you down, and FAU wants to run around and hide from you. So that'll be an interesting matchup. One thing FAU proved is it's hard to hold them down for two halves. Like Tennessee held them down for one, but eventually they're gonna make 3 or 4 in a heartbeat on you, and it's like a 12-0 run waiting to happen.
Yeah, you've got a good eye for ball because your description of Tennessee chased them around is exactly what happened in that game because Tennessee tried to play big. And that played right into Florida Atlantic's hands. And I think San Diego State has the same problem because when I watch Florida Atlantic play, they throw the ball ahead fast. They get a paint touch. They swing it, and all of a sudden the defense is chasing instead of guarding, which is a big difference.
That's right.
It's a really big difference. I know San Diego State is good defensively. I find it hard to believe that they're better than Tennessee was defensively. And Florida Atlantic handled that. Think about Florida Atlantic. They were down 7 to Memphis. They had to hit a layup with 2 seconds to go to get out of the first round. They were down 7 to Memphis. I think they were down 6 to Tennessee. They were down 7 to Kansas State. And I was reading a story this morning on Dusty May, the head basketball coach there, that I think about 3 hours after he signed the contract back in March of 2018, the AD dropped him back off at the hotel. His wife was waiting on him. He walked in the room and literally started bawling. Saying, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm not ready for this. This job is going to be too hard. I've seen the facilities. After he signed the contract, they took him to see the gym, the facility, and he was overwhelmed with imposter syndrome. I can't do this. This is not for me. Like literally broke down trying to figure out how do I get out of this. And his wife, who I think they started dating in like junior high. Wow. I think it goes back that far. Wow. Basically said, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. You are made for this moment. It is going to be hard. You are going to figure it out. And we're staying right here. We're not trying to do anything other than figure out how do we get this job done. So
what a
I love
story.
That side. Yeah, I love that side story of.
It reminds me of Scotty
Florida.
Scheffler and what his wife said to him on the Sunday of the Masters. Like, I'm not ready for
about
this.
that?
I don't think I can do this. And
for
our listeners, I hope that's a word of encouragement. Scotty Scheffler is one of the greatest winners the game of golf has seen in the modern era in a very early period of time. And Dustin May is doing some stuff that, most coaches just dream about to not only go to the Final Four, but to go to the Final Four with a group of 5 school mid-major team it's incredible. And he's won 35 games. I mean, I don't care what league you're in. You won 35 games. He obviously is an incredible coach, but even the best struggle with self-doubt. So that transitioned us well into our recap of all of our guests this week. And Jimmy, why don't you kick us off with my buddy Dan McDonnell? What did he coach you up on?
Yeah, it's we did this at the end of 2022. We went back and reviewed all of our guests. We're going to try to do it every, 6 or 7 weeks,
quarter,
just so we can kind of
quarter or so maybe.
Every quarter. I like how you put that every quarter. But Dan McDonnell, if you remember, is a head baseball coach at Louisville. And the one thing that has really stuck with me that I have not done yet because I blamed it on, I'm traveling 5 days out of 7, which I was. But he really challenged me on fasting to the point that I'm not trying to say how great of a guy. I'm attempting to do that now in my off season for a while. And I want to learn and be taught from it and get my heart clear like Dan told us that it did for him. Because God's word, Chris, again in Matthew 6:16, Jesus is saying, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show men they are fasting. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. So it's very clear. Jesus says there is a reward. There is a reward for fasting. Now, if you do it just so everybody knows you do it and you think you're cool and you're trying to be godly, that is your reward. Hey, good job, Chris. Way to go. But Jesus is very clear. There's a reward for fasting. And I'm going to challenge our listeners again to go back and maybe listen to that episode or just get in God's written word and see if he speaks to your heart about the purpose of fasting, what it does in your life, where it puts God in your day, once a week, however often you want to do it. But I love the challenge from him, his transparency on the coaching us up on fasting.
Yeah, we also talked about that passage about how it really coaches you up on toughness too, right? Because it's like you're not eating for a day, or depending on how you want to do it. And he tells you, put some oil on your face, like put a smile on your face. You don't need to walk around and woe is me and look how spiritual I am kind of thing. And I told you about that story where one of Coach McDonnell's former players was sitting at my early morning men's group, and I challenged the guy to shower before he comes. Like, dude, you put some oil on your face, freshen up.
Yeah.
Like wake up. And anyway, it's funny because Coach Max he's such a dude. He challenged. There's another one of his players, doesn't sit at my table, but goes to that same men's group. And he challenged that dude like a week later with the same thing. Like he's a beauty. He's always coaching. And anyway, he was fantastic. One other quick note from Coach McDonnell that I loved what he said, which was, he defines culture it starts with people. Right? Everybody uses that word in sports and culture. They change the culture. It starts with people. And I think from a Coach Me Up podcast standpoint, like the people who do we allow to speak to us and who do we allow to sharpen us? That matters so much in the culture we're trying to build in our own homes and our teams that we're coaching and influencing, our workplaces, all that kind of stuff. So good note to remember. After Coach McDonnell was Clark Kellogg, one of my favorites, he is right in the heart of it right now. And he's just a beautiful, beautiful communicator. What was your biggest takeaway from Clark?
I go back to the one sentence that he said that he was talking about spending time with the Lord in the morning in his quiet time and reading God's written word. And he said, his words water my heart. I've never heard it put like that. That God's written word right here, my Bible that I keep on my desk at all times, I should look at that much more through the eyes of it's watering my heart. And we know that all things come from our heart. Everything of who we are, it starts with our heart. And I love how he expressed that. I love how his authenticity of how his relationship with the Lord is as real as it is with any best friend that any of us have ever had. Like he's that close. And he also talked about the snare of compare, which we all fight. I mean, we all fight at a different level, whether it's whatever it is. I need to go through the list of what you compare yourself to, but all those voices that pull on us. And he reminded us again that we have to be anchored in something other than all the 1,000 voices that are telling us, be anchored over here, be anchored over here, be anchored over here. No, be anchored in God's written word at all times. But I love that. I love that simple phrase, his words water my heart. And I hope that resonated with our listeners as well. How about you?
Well, if you remember, first of all, I think Clark Kellogg has just an incredible command of the language.
Gift.
Spurtability. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that he said that is
squeeze the orange.
I mean, the guy is just he's unbelievable. Right? He's a legend in the broadcasting field. But he gave us another phrase that I thought was fantastic when I asked him about Jalen Hurts and Pat Mahomes because it was on the verge of the Super Bowl. And he said those two handle surplus well. And it's like, man, just the way he encapsulates this thought of they're both just incredibly gifted men, but they handle their gifts very well, right? And so many people can look at people that have this or that or the other, and well, it's easy for them. They've got this. And it's like, yeah, but man, to whom much is given, much is required, right? And those two handle their surplus really, really well. And I think about that in the sense of, how am I using my gifts for God's glory and the good of others? Am I being a good steward of that? I just thought that was a fantastic challenge.
No, it's one of our favorite episodes that we've had with Clark Kellogg, and he got to the point that he had the world by the tail in the NBA, and he got to the point where he had to question himself, what is my purpose in life? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a question that all of us probably have answered or need to answer at some point, and I would challenge you to go back and listen to that one. He also said something very simple. Seth Davis is also he's a really good follow in college basketball. Worked with Clark in CBS, and one of the tweets that Seth sends out every morning is very simple: just be kind. Just be kind. Believer, non-believer, just be kind. And Clark, one of the things he said was, it's nice to be good. It's better to be nice. And there's not a nicer, gentler, my heart's been changed by Jesus spirit guy than we've had on our podcast than Clark Kellogg. Just the common sense takeaway of just be kind to others was it's important, because I can be unkind pretty quick. Just being transparent, I can be unkind pretty quick.
He said it was a youth basketball
I know you're not
coach.
wired like that.
Oh, no, I'm always roses and butterflies. Just ask my players. I asked him, it was like a youth middle school basketball coach. It's good to be nice. It's nice to be good, but it's better to be nice. I thought, we got in that conversation about just the lion and the lamb. And, obviously there are Jesus was a lot of things. I don't know how high on the list nice would have been listed. And so while being loving and being kind to people is a calling, sometimes, especially when you're raising little ones, it's not nice. Nice sometimes doesn't get your kids in bed at night. So there's a balance there that we're all trying to find. That's why we need the Lord's wisdom, because sometimes we got to be clear, and clear is always kind, but sometimes it's not nice. And so that's
it's not easy.
That's not an easy balance, but thank God for grace, number one, and thank God for wisdom, because we need it to figure out some of that stuff. Madi Prewett was next, and Madi made a huge impact on our home because, number one, she spoke to all of us, but she spoke directly, I think, to young women, who I'm raising one, and so that meant a lot. And she signed a book for my daughter, which meant a ton. Now, Sydney, we got spring break coming up, and Sydney, I've been staying on her about starting that book. She hasn't started it yet, but so thank you, Madi, for sending that. But, man, I thought Madi was fantastic on a number of different fronts. I actually listened to the episode in a car ride with my son once, and Jackson, my oldest boy, was getting a kick out of it because we were laughing about Maddie's story about her and her dad. She was her dad's point guard, and how she got it worse than everybody else because she was the point guard and her dad was the coach. And Jackson was laughing, and I was laughing. And I said, "See, son, this isn't, you're not the only one." So we had a pretty good laugh about that. But Maddie was just so down to earth and well-rounded, but also very, very bold in her faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was, if you don't know who Madi Prewett, it's now Madi Prewett Trout, recently married in the last few months, but she didn't make a name for herself. God lifted her up when she was on ABC's show The Bachelor, and she made a strong faith-based decision to leave that show when it got to the overnight stay of how that show plays out. When you get down to the finals, you spend the night with The Bachelor, and she was opting out at that point. And she got hammered by a lot of folks on social media, but God also lifted her up because she took a strong stance. And the one thing that I had circled out of several things she taught us that day, she, as a coach's daughter, she coached us up about as well as anyone we've had. But she talked about the importance, Chris, of having intense boundaries in her life. And she was talking about how she needs intense boundaries specifically with her handling of social media, that she's very protective of what she allows to come into her ears, into her eyes, into her thoughts. And I took that, and I put stricter, more intense boundaries around my own social media after visiting with her, because as just like you, we're in the public's eye. We give opinions on our sport. They're not always popular. They're not always what people want to hear about their team, whatever. But I have made a much more intentional effort to have boundaries around me, because not just anyone has the right to speak to my heart. They don't. They don't have the right to speak to Madi Prewett's heart, to Chris Burke's heart, to my heart, but they will if we allow them. And the enemy will if we allow him. And I think that's a great takeaway right now for all of us to understand intense boundaries we need to have, not only through our social media and how the voice of comparison starts getting to us, but just negative things that can be said about us if you're in any type of a public eye like you and I are. But then the intense boundaries that I know I want around me to keep the enemy outside of those guardrails. And I love how she spoke straight and clearly about the importance of intense boundaries in our life.
Can I say something that's a little bit along those a lot along those lines that I think can be very gray to some. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and it was very clear to me that the negative feedback that this person was getting was being just very easily dismissed as kind of from being over the top from people that are just irrational.
Okay.
And for instance, guys like me and you, we make a tweet, we're calling a game or we're about to call a game. Throughout the course of the game, you get 10 comments, 7 of them are positive, 3 of them are negative. It's real easy to respond to the positive ones and just dismiss the negative ones as zealots who are off their rocker, right?
Right. Yeah.
A lot of times that's true. But one thing that I feel like, as I've prayed for wisdom, there has been conversations I've had over the last couple of years with people who came to me with things that were mostly unfair, but actually had some good nuggets in there. Like, okay, let me get out of my feelings here, and let me dismiss all my preconceived notions and defensiveness, and let me actually hear what this person's saying. And to be honest with you, Jimmy, people that are not necessarily people that I would expect certain things from, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is unfair, but that's actually fair. I probably do need to reevaluate that, whereas sometimes we say, okay, well, I'm only going to let these 3 people speak to me. Okay, you've probably identified those 3 people as really good voices in your life, but sometimes we put ourselves in too tight of a bubble where we dismiss all the other voices as like, who cares? And so it is a fine line, right? Like, again, the social media stuff is a little bit of an extreme example, but like every once in a while I look at my mentions and I'm like, oh, I'm completely mispronouncing that person's name. That's helpful. Like, you probably don't need to call me bad words about it, but like, thank you. I now know that I've been saying that person's name wrong. You know what I'm saying? So like, sometimes we can, it's like a lot of things in life. We can go sometimes to opposite extremes on like, I'm listening to way too much negative criticism. I need to stop that. Yeah. Or I'm like, I'm not listening to any, and I'm only going to filter in the good stuff. And then I can get off my rocker there too of like, well, everybody loves me. Like, no, they don't. There's 10 people that have crushed you. Like, you need to shut up more. Right. You need to get this guy's name right. Or did you even know this person used to play at that school or what? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that can be shallow as calling a game or as deep as like some blind spots that you've developed in your life because maybe you only are now stuck in a bubble of a couple people or whatever. Anyway, I just been wrestling through that myself, so I'm kind of giving that up to you.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So anyway, just sometimes people that are off the rocker can actually give you a good word if you actually receive it, even if their heart's not in a good place for giving it to you, but it might actually hit you.
My take on it before we move on to Eric Wood is I think there's so much negative unintentionally or intentionally pulling on us that I try to do all I can to eliminate as much of that as possible, knowing that it's impossible to eliminate the enemy's voice. I'm going to be very guarded and do all I can, man, all I can, and not just keep the door wide open for him all the time.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
You know, that's I guess that's kind of my biggest takeaway there that I would want people to kind of think about. But anyways, Madi Prewett, the daughter of a coach,
Sorry
coached
for the
us
rabbit
up,
trail.
did a phenomenal job.
Madi was great. And,
no, that's good.
And she coached me up on a point that I think all of us dads should remember is love your daughter in such a way that that's what she is looking for in a man. And when she said that I want somebody, I was looking for somebody that loved me as well as my dad. I thought, man, what a calling.
Yeah. Yep. Put some pressure on you in your home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a good way.
way.
Eric Wood, Dr. Eric Wood, he's the athletic director at Louisiana Tech, and man, he's just my notepad is filled up with stuff. Moving quickly here with 2 more to go, but so many things he talked about. He gave us a good story from Jeremiah chapter 4, I think, and 7, right in there. But very simply, he was talking about representing Louisiana Tech athletics, but he said he tells his student athletes all the time the logo never comes off. When you're out in the community, you got to get your hat on like you are Louisiana Tech athlete at all times. And I quickly transferred that to our logo as a follower of the way never comes off. And that's a big responsibility. It's a big responsibility for us to carry around, but to whom much is given, much is expected. You and I were texting about that this morning, that there is a responsibility as a believer to we will never be perfect. We're going to stumble at all times, but that doesn't mean we can just take our logo off at certain times and just say the heck with it and lose our discipline with our tongue, lose our discipline with our eyes, lose our discipline with how we're living life. That logo as a follower of Jesus never comes off, and we're responsible for that logo. So I just appreciated how so many things that he said, but that's the one thing that stood out to me.
That story reminds me, or that example reminds me of a story I heard from Brett Butler, the great baseball player. Told a story one time that he was on a flight late after a game, and Brett was a Christian, and I think led their chapel, and kind of had a position in the team as like that guy, right?
Yeah.
And late at night, a stewardess spilt a drink on him on the plane, and he got up and kind of read her the riot act. And the peanut gallery in the back started ripping him like, "Oh, big Christian guy, that's how you treat the stewardess? She just made a mistake. Give her some grace." And he said he turned around and looked at him. He said, "What you guys don't understand is that's actually me. Like, only by the grace of God do you ever see anything good in me. Like that's that's how I'm wired to respond, and I hate that about myself. I want to have more patience. I want to have more grace. I want to be kinder, gentler. But apart from the grace of God, that's how I act that's how I'm wired."
Absolutely.
And I thought it was a really powerful example of like, what we're all trying to do, which was we'll never be sinless, but we're trying to sin less. And when we get in our flesh, ugliness can pop up like that.
Yes.
But also when you put yourself out there from a faith perspective, people are watching. People are paying attention. He was like, I remember him telling the story saying like he didn't realize how quick the guys were they kind of reveled in him having a moment. And it made him realize like, man, there's a responsibility to putting himself out there. I also loved what Eric Wood said about a very deep and meaningful definition of success, which is to be obedient and faithful. Mm-hmm. Not, there was no this number of championships or hold this job at this school or, make this income. It's like the way he defined success was obedient and faithful. I think that's a very godly definition of the word.
Yeah, I wrote down obedience plus faithfulness equals success. Love that. He was great. Talked about culture, class, and competitive excellence, how he leads his program. And he's a rising star. His heart for the Lord, though,
was evident.
Was awfully
very
strong.
Bold, yes.
Yeah, it's very evident. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very evident. So, all right, that gets us up to Gabe Gross, and he was like everybody, just so many good wisdom nuggets that comes out of coaching and being around people that are just in the grind and the fight every day. One of my favorite things he said was, you can train a donkey for the Kentucky Derby, but when the horn goes off, you're still a donkey. I don't know where that fits spiritually.
I think it's a great coaching nugget, though. I think it's, and really parenting, like, people, like, you want to train them up, but you have to understand, who you're dealing with, right? God's created us all uniquely and beautifully and wonderfully, and if you're a donkey, you're probably not going to win the Derby. Like, I hate to tell you, the world wants to tell you can do whatever you set your mind to, but a donkey's not going to win the Derby. So
that donkey needs to have intense barriers around his ears, so he doesn't hear guys like you telling him that he can't win the can't win the Derby.
I want my kids
the
to
other
chase
thing
their dreams, but they're probably not going to be Shaq. Like, that's just sorry. I hate to be a dream crusher, but
One thing that Coach said out of several was, he said, when we focus on ourselves, our problems get bigger. And I thought about that. Like, if I go about my day just thinking about my problems, why this, why that, why this, why that, it just continues to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and consumes me in a way that I have no compassion, no eyes for my family or those around me. And it doesn't take long to look around and realize what I'm dealing with today is not nearly as severe as I think it is. But when we focus on ourselves, our problems get bigger. And I would finish that sentence with, God gets smaller.
Yeah.
God gets smaller. We focus on ourselves,
no doubt.
Our problems get bigger, and God gets smaller. And it was just so many things. He mentioned the book of Romans at one point.
On theology,
like
if he could challenge people to read the book. It was Romans or Philippians, and then a non-biblical book was More Than a Carpenter, which we want to just throw those back out there. Great reads.
Yes. Yep.
He got it. He talked about Luke 16:10, being faithful in the little things, right? Yep. And if you're faithful in the little things, you will be entrusted with more. And it's a great coaching point.
Yep.
I think about Dusty May and, just being faithful with the little things of, okay, here I am. I'm at FAU. There's a lot of disadvantages, but what do I do? How do I get started? Let me just recruit the first player. Let me talk to the first booster on how we could, that's all you can do, right? Just one step at a time. But when the Lord's math is, when you're faithful with the little things, He will entrust you with more. But a lot of people are, too big to do the small things, and so they end up being too small to do the big things. And I think it's a biblical lesson of being faithful. It's not. I don't think it's a biblical lesson. It is a biblical lesson to be faithful in the little things. But I also think for those of us that coach, and we're all coaching in some regard, if we're being honest, right? Whether we have a whistle in our mouth or not. And it's great for our own hearts, because we all like doing the big things. We like the mountaintop moments. We like the cherry on top. We like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But the reality is the process is actually the best part. And when we focus on the process, we focus on the day-to-day, usually the end of the rainbow comes in some regard, right? It might not be exactly the way we want it to, but there's usually good fruit that comes from that. And Gabe did a very good job of articulating that, I think.
Yeah. There's also good fruit comes from plain old sticking to it and perseverance and being faithful to where you are and trusting God's timeline. As I circle back, we finish up here to the Final Four, Brian Dutcher's the head coach at San Diego State. 27 years, he was the assistant to Steve Fisher. He was the assistant coach to one guy for 27 years, and waited and waited and waited and waited, stayed loyal, kept working, kept trusting, and boom, here he is now with his team in the Final Four after being an assistant coach for 27 years. I don't know anything about his faith journey at all. I just love that story of perseverance and patience and being a star where you are, and trusting God and His timing for what He has for us in life. So
Steve Fisher was at San
we're
Diego
right.
State for 27 years. That's incredible.
Yeah, Michigan before
Right,
that.
right.
And so
Oh, so he was
Dutcher was
with
with him
him at
all
Michigan. Okay.
the way back
I
through
got
then.
you.
Yeah, all the way back
So
through
he
then.
coached the Fab Five.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how loyal and he was to his head coach to be there for 27 years. I appreciate CBS asking him about Coach Fisher when he advanced to the Final Four. So
I think one thing
Chris,
Gabe,
we talked
Gabe
about him.
said too that is exactly on point with what you just said. Sometimes he felt like his playing career, he got the tree before he grew the roots. And as a coach, he feels like very much he grew the roots, and now the tree is growing in front of him. And I thought that was a great illustration of kind of what we were just talking about, which is everybody wants the prize and nobody likes the process. And the reality is the growing of the roots is what produces a tree that can withstand the wind and the waves, right? So just a good note there. Tell me the San Diego State coach's name again?
Brian Dutcher.
Yeah, he's ready for the Final Four. He's certainly put in his time. His roots have grown. There's no doubt about that.
So I'll finish up with this. Growing roots, right there. That's how we grow our roots. There's no plan B, C, or D other than spending time daily letting God's word water our heart and grow our roots. So when that tree starts swaying in our life, like you just said, man, we are grounded and our roots are really, really deep. I'll finish this up with that thought today. We say it a lot before we get in our conversation, but our sponsors they continue to be so loyal and so good to us. Connexial, a group out of Tennessee, is just they've been so faithful. They're such big believers in what we're doing. OneCountry.com. I have a group of buddies here in Northwest Arkansas that we are powered by them. They do so much for us behind the scenes with social media and different things. They have a heart for giving. If you have not visited OneCountry.com, go to their website, join their team, and get a part of the giving that they do and actually win. But you're going to also have a great chance to give as well. And then Blue Delta Jeans is all throughout the country, but they're a big part of the SEC where Chris and I spend a bulk of our time covering college basketball and college baseball. So we thank those sponsors again. So Chris, it's been good. Yeah. Final Four about to tip off. I know you're knee deep into college baseball. We'll continue to dig into that over the next several months as you continue to tell us who's going to advance to the College World Series. I know you're going to have those. Is it 8 teams advanced to Omaha? Yeah. You'll go 8 for 8.
Yeah, I'll nail it, no doubt. Yeah.
On your prediction, you'll go 8 for 8. I know you will. All right, man. Hey, great. Appreciate our time, right?
Yeah, let me pray for us. Lord, you're good. Thank you for the blessing of being able to talk about your ways and your wisdom, Lord, because they are best. Lord, help us to submit to those. Help us to be faithful and obedient. And we just pray for our listeners, Lord. If there's somebody out there struggling, hearing the sound of my voice, Lord, would you encourage them? Would you draw near to them? Thank you for the blessing of being able to share your wisdom. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.